AITA for feeling stuck in my relationship. I'm 28 and my partner, Lila, is 29. We've been together for 6 years. We have a 4-year-old daughter, Mia, and Lila is pregnant again. Lately, I've been asking myself whether I'm staying in this relationship because I genuinely want to, or because it's easier than facing the unknown. I find myself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what my life might look like if I made a different choice. But every time I consider it, a heavy weight settles in my chest, and I feel guilty for even imagining leaving. When we first got together, it was right after Lila ended a complicated relationship. She pursued me, and I was flattered, swept up by the idea that someone who had gone through so much still wanted me. That first year was thrilling. We spent hours talking, laughing until our faces hurt, and planning small adventures together. I remember thinking that this could be the one, the person I would share my life with. But the excitement slowly faded, replaced by tension that I didn't notice at first. Lila has a way of expressing anger that leaves me walking on eggshells. If something upsets her, even slightly, she might storm out of the house, slamming doors, only to send frantic texts demanding that I come to calm her down. Sometimes, I rush over, heart pounding, trying to soothe her, only to realize she was upset over something trivial, something I could have talked through calmly if the storm hadn't escalated first. It's exhausting, trying to anticipate every mood, every potential trigger, every word that could set her off. Over the years, I began to notice patterns I didn't understand at first. Lila would have sudden panic attacks or claim new health problems, especially during arguments or moments when she wanted attention. At the time, I believed every word. I tried to comfort her, stay by her side, do whatever I could to make her feel safe. But eventually, I realized that some of these incidents seemed convenient. They happened during moments when she wanted to manipulate the situation or gain reassurance. Learning this later was crushing. I felt like I had been living in a fog, unsure which moments were real and which were triggered by something else. I have tried to step back from the relationship many times. I have questioned myself, asked whether I should leave, but every time, guilt and fear keep me in place. I worry about the impact on Mia, about Lila's feelings, about the life we've built together. Even now, imagining stepping away feels impossible. It feels like I would be abandoning someone who depends on me, even though part of me knows the relationship is taking more from me than it gives. We have had countless conversations about her past behavior. Lila apologizes, genuinely at times, acknowledging what she has done and promising to do better. But old patterns resurface. The emotional exhaustion never fully goes away. I find myself dreading conflicts because I never know how they will escalate. I sometimes feel trapped in a cycle where I am both caring and fearful, loving and resentful. I am constantly questioning whether I am enough, whether this is what love should feel like, whether happiness is even possible here. Our intimacy has suffered too. Before Mia was born, we were physically close, affectionate, and playful. Afterward, everything changed. Physical closeness has become rare, almost transactional at times. Lila insists that romance must be part of intimacy, but I honestly can't remember a time when it was. I try to approach her gently, but she refuses to guide me or help me understand her needs. She says it is unfair if I experience pleasure and she doesn't, and yet she has given me one-sided favors before. I am left confused, frustrated, and craving connection in ways I don't know how to fulfill. The tension often leads to arguments. Simple disagreements about household chores, meals, or parenting spiral into nights of raised voices and slammed doors. She accuses me of being emotionally distant, while I accuse her of being controlling or unpredictable. Sometimes we sit in the silence afterward, both of us exhausted, neither knowing how to repair the damage done. I want to be patient, to be understanding, but I feel my patience slipping. I feel my own needs ignored, my own well-being sidelined. There are nights when I imagine leaving, walking out of the house, never looking back. And then I think of Mia, small and innocent, sleeping in her bed, and I can't. The thought of her growing up without both parents in some form terrifies me. I imagine the arguments escalating, custody battles, loneliness, and heartbreak. I also imagine staying and feeling trapped, watching my happiness slowly erode, watching Lila's patterns repeat themselves year after year. It's a nightmare with no clear way out. I know I am not perfect. I have my flaws, my mistakes, my shortcomings. I try to work on them. I try to be patient, kind, and understanding. I try to communicate openly, even when it is uncomfortable. But I cannot ignore the fact that I am emotionally drained. I sometimes feel like I have given everything I can give and received very little in return. I want both of us to be happy, to feel safe, to feel loved, but I cannot see how that is possible without both of us making radical changes. And yet, despite everything, I still love her. I still hope. I still dream of days when we can laugh freely again, when Mia can grow up in a home where love doesn't feel heavy with fear and guilt. I just don't know if that dream is realistic. I don't know if it's possible to undo years of patterns, trauma, and unmet expectations. I feel stuck between love and fear, hope and despair. Every day is a careful mental balancing act, and I am not sure how long I can keep it up. The worst part is that there is no simple answer. No one can tell me whether leaving would be selfish or staying would be foolish. No one can tell me whether the love we have is enough to overcome the challenges we face. I only know that I feel tired. Tired of navigating emotions like a maze. Tired of fearing conflict. Tired of questioning my own worth in the most intimate parts of life. And still, I stay, because leaving feels impossible, because hope refuses to die, and because love, messy, painful, complicated love, keeps me tethered to a life I sometimes wish I could escape from, but never fully do. Last week, Lila asked me to join her for lunch at her parents' house. At first, I thought it would be a simple, quiet visit, just a meal and small talk. But from the moment we arrived, the atmosphere felt heavier than I expected. Her mother, June, greeted us warmly, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of scrutiny that made me uneasy. At first, I tried to relax, telling myself I was overthinking things, but then the questions started. June asked about my work schedule in a way that felt pointed rather than casual. She wanted to know why I seemed distant lately and whether I was really committed to supporting Lila and our family. I tried to answer politely, explaining the long hours and stress at work, but her tone carried an edge, as if my answers were inadequate. Every word I spoke seemed to be measured, tested, judged. I could feel Lila shifting in her seat beside me, but she didn't intervene. She didn't say anything to stop her mother from pressing me, and I felt cornered, trapped between politeness and defensiveness. The conversation took a turn during lunch when June began reminiscing about her own marriage and subtly comparing my dedication to that of her husband. She spoke about sacrifice, attention, and devotion, making pointed remarks that felt directed at me personally. My stomach tightened, and I could feel myself growing tense. I tried to smile, tried to nod, but each sentence felt like a small accusation. Lila laughed nervously at some of her mother's comments, but there was no defense, no reassurance. I felt isolated in a room full of people I was supposed to feel comfortable with. After lunch, I excused myself to get a glass of water. June followed me into the kitchen, and she didn't smile this time. She leaned against the counter and said quietly, "I just want to be sure Lila and the kids are okay. Sometimes I worry you're not fully present." Her words were gentle on the surface, but the weight behind them made me flinch. I tried to reassure her, but she pressed further, asking about my intentions for the future, whether I was planning to prioritize my family or just my career. Every answer I gave felt insufficient, every pause awkward. Later that afternoon, after we returned home, I found a Facebook message from June waiting for me. She had written a long note expressing concern that I wasn't fully committed to Lila and the family, questioning whether I truly understood the responsibilities of fatherhood and partnership. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. I wanted to reply, to defend myself, but every word I imagined seemed wrong. I didn't want to escalate things, but I also couldn't leave her assumptions unaddressed. I ended up not responding at all, letting the tension sit like a stone in my chest. That evening, Lila and I drove in silence. The tension from the visit lingered between us, heavier than ever. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet, almost trembling. She admitted that she had been feeling neglected and insecure for months, that she felt like I wasn't truly present in our relationship anymore. Hearing her vulnerability was startling. Lila has rarely expressed her feelings this openly without anger or defensiveness, and I wasn't sure how to react. I wanted to comfort her, to hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But the truth was, I felt drained, confused, and unsure how to fix things. We argued quietly in the car, the kind of argument that isn't loud but cuts deeper. She accused me of being emotionally absent, of failing to notice the strain she carries as a mother and partner. I tried to explain my exhaustion, my own fears and struggles, but every word seemed to fall flat. She interrupted me, frustrated that I couldn't understand her without needing explanations, and I interrupted her in turn, feeling attacked and unappreciated. The tension escalated until we both fell silent, sitting side by side, staring out at the passing streetlights, each lost in our own thoughts. Once home, the argument didn't end. We continued texting late into the night, each message carrying the weight of everything unsaid during the day. She detailed how lonely she felt, how pressured she was to manage everything, how small gestures from me had gone unnoticed. I responded honestly, sharing my own feelings of being overwhelmed, trapped, and guilty for even considering leaving. Our messages spiraled back and forth, sometimes heated, sometimes tender, revealing how much weight we had both been carrying silently for months, maybe years. By the early hours of the morning, we had both exhausted ourselves emotionally, but something had shifted. The fight hadn't solved anything, and yet it exposed a raw, unfiltered layer of honesty we rarely allowed ourselves to show. I realized how much distance and unspoken tension had accumulated between us, and how much work would be needed to repair it. I didn't know what the next step was, but I knew one thing: ignoring the problem was no longer an option. Even now, days later, the memory of that lunch sits heavily on me. The scrutiny, the subtle judgments, the raw vulnerability, the long hours of texting, it all lingers. Something has to change, or the weight of it will break us both. I feel exhausted, emotionally raw, and painfully aware of just how fragile our connection has become. And yet, despite all the tension and conflict, I still hope we can rebuild something stronger, something safer, something honest. A few days after the lunch at her parents' house, I got a call from Mia's preschool. My stomach dropped the moment I heard her teacher's voice, slightly panicked, explaining that Mia had tripped while playing outside and had a small cut on her knee. I could hear the worry in her tone, and I immediately felt a surge of panic. Lila and I rushed to pick her up, moving quickly but carefully, our voices tense as we coordinated who would drive, who would grab the first aid kit, and what to say to Mia. When we got to the preschool, Mia was sitting on a bench, holding her knee, tears streaming down her cheeks. Lila scooped her up immediately, brushing her hair back, whispering comforting words. I knelt beside them, trying to reassure both of them, but my own hands were shaking. The ride home was silent at first, the tension thick between us. Mia was quiet in the back seat, dabbing at her tear-stained face, and Lila's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. I tried to offer a calming word here and there, but the atmosphere was charged, like electricity before a storm. Then, without warning, Lila burst into tears. Her shoulders shook, and I could hear her voice break as she confessed, almost between sobs, that she felt trapped, that she felt unappreciated, that she had been carrying the weight of everything: Mia, the house, the pregnancy, our relationship, alone for months. My instinct was to reach over, to take her hand, to tell her it would be okay, but she recoiled, turning to face me with a look I didn't recognize. "You don't even see me," she said, her voice trembling but sharp. "You're always somewhere else, distant, selfish, emotionally absent. You act like you're here, but you're not really here." I opened my mouth to respond, tried to explain that I was exhausted, that I was worried about her and Mia, that I had been trying in my own way, but every word seemed to fall flat. She cut me off mid-sentence, frustration and pain intertwining in her tone. "Do you even know what it feels like to feel alone in your own home? Do you even notice what I do for this family every day?" The drive home felt endless. Every time I tried to speak, she snapped back. Every attempt at reassurance felt like it missed the mark. I could feel my chest tightening, my hands clenching the steering wheel, my mind racing with guilt and confusion. When we finally got home, Mia ran off to her room, leaving us in the kitchen, the silence heavy but not peaceful. That evening, after putting Mia to bed, Lila sent me a long Gmail message. I watched the little notification appear on my laptop screen, knowing this was going to be more than just a few sentences. I opened it slowly, bracing myself. The message was detailed and raw, cataloging every moment over the past month when she had felt alone, ignored, or unloved. She wrote about the mornings when she felt I didn't notice her exhaustion, the nights when I worked late while she managed Mia, the small gestures I hadn't made that made her feel invisible. Every paragraph was punctuated with emotional honesty that was almost unbearable to read. As I scrolled through the email, guilt wrapped around me like a vice. I could feel the exhaustion of months pressing down on me, the cumulative weight of misunderstandings, of miscommunications, of small frustrations that had never been voiced before. It was painful to see how much she had been suffering silently. And yet, somewhere under all that weight, I felt a flicker of clarity. This was the first time in a long time that we were speaking to each other without yelling, without defensiveness, without avoidance. I responded carefully, typing slowly, weighing every word. I didn't want to blame her, and I didn't want to hide my own exhaustion. I explained that I was struggling, that I had been carrying fear, guilt, and stress in silence, but that I still wanted to be present and supportive. I suggested that we consider seeing a family counselor, someone who could help us communicate better and address the tension before it became unbearable. She hesitated. I could sense it in her pauses between texts. There was skepticism, a fear that this would just be another failed attempt at fixing what we both knew had been broken for too long. But she didn't reject the idea. That small acknowledgement, that tiny willingness to try something new, felt like a lifeline. By the time we finished texting, it was nearly midnight. We were both emotionally drained, physically tired, and yet there was a sense of fragile hope between us. We had spent hours unpacking months of unspoken feelings, and although the air was heavy with guilt, frustration, and lingering resentment, it was also the first real moment of connection in a long time. That night, I lay in bed next to Lila, listening to her breathing, thinking about the weight she had carried, the love she had poured into our family, and the mistakes I had made in failing to notice it. I realized just how much tension had accumulated and how much effort it would take to rebuild trust and intimacy. I didn't know if we could fix everything, but I knew that ignoring the problem any longer would only make it worse. Something had to change, and even amid the guilt and exhaustion, I still felt hope, a cautious, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be the turning point. But I also knew it wouldn't be easy. The coming weeks would be filled with hard conversations, compromises, and emotional labor. We would have to face uncomfortable truths, admit mistakes, and confront long-standing patterns. It would test both of us, and there were no guarantees. But for the first time in months, I felt that we were at least facing it together. Yesterday, I came home after a long day at work, feeling the usual exhaustion settle into my bones. The apartment was quiet, unusually so. I found Lila sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, Mia beside her, coloring quietly in her little sketchbook. Lila seemed calmer than usual. There was no tension in her shoulders, no flicker of irritation in her eyes. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure whether this was normal or if something had happened while I was gone. Lila looked up and smiled softly, the kind of small, genuine smile I hadn't seen in weeks. Then she handed me her phone. My first instinct was to refuse. Sometimes seeing her messages to friends felt like opening a window into her private world that I wasn't meant to enter, but something in her gaze told me she wanted me to read them. I scrolled slowly through the series of messages she had sent to her best friend. They were raw, honest, and vulnerable. She admitted how her behavior had hurt me in the past, how she recognized the ways she could be controlling or emotionally manipulative. She confessed fears I hadn't realized she carried so deeply, that she worried I might leave, that she feared losing me entirely, and that she often felt alone even when I was physically present. Reading her words, I felt a rush of emotions: surprise, guilt, relief, and a cautious glimmer of hope. I didn't speak immediately. I just sat there, letting her words sink in, letting the weight of her honesty wash over me. For a long moment, we sat in silence, both of us processing. Then, tentatively, Lila spoke. She suggested we plan a weekend of connection, a time where we would put our phones aside, remove distractions, and focus entirely on each other and Mia. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to dismiss the idea, thinking it would be just another attempt that might fizzle out. But another part, the part that had been craving genuine connection, said yes immediately. That weekend began slowly. Saturday morning, we woke early and made breakfast together. There were small moments of friction. Lila snapped at me for pouring the milk incorrectly, and I muttered under my breath, frustrated. But instead of escalating into a fight, we both paused. We apologized, laughed awkwardly, and moved on. It was strange how small tensions could arise and dissolve without turning into long-standing grudges. Later, we took Mia to the park. The sunlight filtered through the trees, and for a few hours, it felt like a reprieve from the months of tension we'd endured. We talked, truly talked, for the first time in what felt like ages. Lila shared fears she had been too ashamed to voice before, about the pregnancy, about her feelings of inadequacy as a mother, about the lingering resentment she sometimes felt toward me for not noticing the small things. I shared my own fears, about being emotionally exhausted, about struggling to balance work and family, and about the guilt I carried for moments I felt I had failed her. Yet, even in this open space, tension crept in. At one point, Lila mentioned a small frustration from earlier in the week, how I had been distracted during dinner and hadn't helped Mia with her coloring. I tried to explain that I had been mentally preoccupied with a work issue, but she snapped, her voice sharper than I expected. I felt the familiar prickling of defensiveness rise in me. I wanted to argue, to justify myself, but I stopped, taking a breath, reminding myself that the goal was connection, not conflict. We paused, both simmering, then slowly laughed at the absurdity of how quickly small annoyances could spiral. By the evening, we were back home. Mia had fallen asleep, and the apartment was quiet again. We sat on the couch, side by side, holding hands and reflecting on the day. Lila admitted that she felt lighter, that it was the first time in months she felt like we were moving in the same direction. I admitted that I felt a cautious hope, though I also confessed fear that old patterns might resurface, that our fragile progress could be undone by stress, miscommunication, or unresolved past conflicts. We talked late into the night, the kind of conversation that was honest and unguarded. There were moments of tension, when we revisited past arguments, when we admitted mistakes, when old wounds ached. But there were also moments of genuine understanding. I could feel a connection slowly building, a fragile bridge forming between us after months of distance and frustration. By the time we went to bed, I felt exhausted but strangely hopeful. I knew this weekend wouldn't magically fix everything. I knew there would be days of friction ahead, nights when old arguments resurfaced, moments when one of us felt unheard. But I also knew that for the first time in a long while, we were both willing to try, willing to be vulnerable, willing to face discomfort for the sake of our family. And still, I don't know how long this fragile peace will last. I don't know if the old patterns will return. But for the first time in months, I felt a sense of possibility, that maybe, with effort, honesty, and patience, we could rebuild something strong, something safe, something real. For now, that is enough.
You are not the AITA. What I see here isn't you being cruel or careless, it's you drowning in exhaustion, questioning your place, and trying to juggle responsibility with unmet needs. Lila's volatility, her mother's interference, and the constant emotional tightrope you're walking make it clear you've been carrying more weight than one person should. Staying silent, swallowing your fears, and trying to keep peace doesn't make you the villain, it makes you human, stuck in survival mode. My suggestion? You need outside alongside help, therapy, counseling, maybe even space to break the cycle. Humorously put, love shouldn't feel like a group project where you're doing all the work while the other partner just submits the final report with their name on it. So no, you're not the AITA for feeling trapped, uncertain, or worn down. But if you never speak up or set boundaries, you risk becoming the architect of your own misery. Sometimes the bravest, least selfish thing you can do is stop pretending maybe tomorrow it'll magically fix itself. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out AITA for calling out my cousin's girlfriend's jokes. Click here to watch it now.